With Commander being the most popular way that many Magic the Gathering players learn the game, there is one part of the rules that I think is the most misunderstood. The priority system can be pretty complicated for many players. Within the average turn of Magic, let alone the average game, there are so many points at which anyone can make a decision. But those decisions have to be made one at a time. And in today's video, I wanted to go over how that can be used in your advantage in a game of Commander, how using your opponent's ability to answer a certain piece of game-winning tech and or using your own ability to respond to yourself is really important in ensuring your ability to secure the win. Was I in the wrong for this? Sharkboy posts, I was playing a bracket 4 game the other night. One of my opponents, let's call them Steve, revealed their hand the turn prior when politicking showed that they had a swan song in hand. So that's good. A couple of discussions are going around, and I think revealing information that you have to ensure some goodwill from your opponents is actually good based on the situation. There are reasons to do this, but you have to be very careful when you do this, at what point in the game, and how much that's revealing about you. Are you revealing a card with only 2 cards left in your hand? Are you revealing a card after windfalling everybody? Whatever it is, there are different contexts for it all. In the current turn, the player just before me in turn order, Paul, attempts to win via combo. I had my own mana drain in hand, but I knew that Steve, who was last in the turn order, still had the swan song in hand and mana open for it. So I passed priority, knowing that he would have to use it in the game or the game would end. And I think this is a very good thing to do in general. You have to remember, as I always say in many of these videos, that the vast majority of time, you are not going to win the game or even. So it's okay to accept that. You can enjoy yourself a little bit more. And yes, there are ways to tilt the odds in your favor. But in this situation, you are forcing someone else's hand in a situation where all things being even, you would have lost anyway. And if you use the counter spell, you would have used up a resource that you could have potentially used to protect your own combo, stop another game win. Maybe on top of that, for example, this might be a game of CDH where someone goes to put a win on top of the win that's already there. So many things to consider. Again, we're in bracket form, not in CDH, but things to think about. I also knew that if Paul had interaction to stop Steve's swan song, then they could stop in to stop the mana drain. So again, the decision making here is actually top tier. The turn then gets passed to me, where I win with my own combo using mana drain to push through the win. So the assumption here is that Paul did in fact stop the win of Steve, Steve stopped the win of Paul, I should say. And then they were able to go off and protect with mana drain. After the game, Steve says, wow, you were so lucky to top deck that mana drain. And I laughed and said, told him that, what he had done about priority bullying in this case. He got mad and accused me of priority bullying and that he should have just passed priority and let the game end. That's pretty salty. I thought he was just salty about the other two players, but the other two players agreed that it was a bad move. How? I still don't see how this was a dick move, because I used public game knowledge that he had revealed himself, but maybe I should, I just have a blind spot here. Was I in the wrong? Absolutely not. So let me get this out of the way here. We're going to be spending the rest of this video talking about priority and how the average command and how everything they did was actually perfectly fine. Where we get kind of dicey is when you go to your turn and maybe you ask something like, hey, does someone have a piece of interaction? I can do this, but I can't do that. Or like, this is what I'm kind of limited to. Can someone help me out? And then you force someone else to do something when you in fact could have answered it. That's completely different. But if you call someone's bluff, that's perfectly fine, right? You're working within the information that you have. It's just as simple as going for the attack, right? Letting someone go to combat, they go to attack, you don't do anything. They go to defense, you don't do anything, right? Because that attack doesn't have lethal. Then your opponent then goes to buff up that creature, then you respond, right? You call their bluff all the way through based on the information at hand. You give it to them that way, you don't have to use up mana on your turn, and you might be able to cast another spell in that specific situation of the attack. So again, using the information that you have at hand, this is perfectly fine. You have played to your odds and you're able to get there. Ultimately, the way that you can use priority is by knowing the rules of the system itself and using them to your advantage, right? Because the average Commander player learning through a game of Commander isn't going to be learning it most of the time these days through a 60 card constructed environment that might be enforced by a judge, or in a competitive system that might not be an LGS owner, a high level judge or something like that, going through multiple calls and seeing how games play out. They are not having to keep awareness of this. When a lot of games that the average Magic player nowadays plays is more so on the casual side, a lot of things can be skipped over. So again, being aware of the rules is very important, but also having the awareness of the tools that you might have access to is also important. So to prevent something like this in the future, and maybe not in the specific scenario, but maybe you yourself, how do you get around specific interactions where players might be abusing the priority or kind of eliminating it altogether and not giving you a chance to react? Let's talk about that right now. So first and foremost, you need to make sure that you have to be careful with the information that you are giving out. So the fact that that player revealed that they had a swan song was bad, but then contextually explain the fact that it was done for the sake of politicking. So that's fine. A lot of times you can maybe assure to someone else like, hey, I need to do this to catch back up. You know, we have a deal together. I don't have anything going. Do you have a way to maybe stop someone from winning? You say, yep, I got a swan song. I'm perfectly fine. You do what you need to do. And so that's a highlighted situation where maybe you're working together with someone, they're able to catch up while you're able to maybe quote unquote protect the table against someone else that is maybe an arch enemy or is seen as the nemesis of the current board situation. So beyond that, I would say that the only place where something like that is advantageous to you, not only in politicking in that situation that I mentioned where you have a partner, but also in a way where you want to bluff, proactively bluff, call someone else's bluff. So think of a counterspell like Flare of Denial, blue and 1, you counter target spell, or you can cast it for free by sacrificing a creature that you have. So in this case, you can reveal the Swan Song and say, hey, with this Swan Song, I can counter XXX spell, X, Y, and Z spell. And that's not wrong. You are able to stop wins with this Swan Song. So I can stop wins with that. But you then don't reveal the fact that you have a Flare of Denial, a Force of Negation, a Force of Will, a free counter spell that you're able to use to then counter other things, because an opponent might go for a win with a certain creature, a certain artifact, a certain enchantment, some type of loophole in the interaction that you provided, but then don't see the other one. And that's not a scummy thing to do at all. You revealed information for politicking. Someone else used that information to try and take advantage of you. So it's only fair that you then reveal your trump card to stop them. And so I think in a situation like that, that is a perfect way to use the resources already in your deck, but also the situation at hand. Obviously, you can't have all the interaction all the time, but assuming this is a bracket 4 game, like in this situation, on average, your decks are going to be more concentrated. You are going to be potentially protecting a set group of 2 to 3 combos and or board states that you are looking to achieve. And so you are building your deck around having, again, likely multiple pieces of interaction, counter magic, whatever it is. So revealing those proactively can be powerful instead of bluffing them the whole time. It also creates a pattern of behavior over time to showcase the type of player that you are. It makes it so in a play group that you're always frequenting, people are aware that you are the person that likely has the interaction, that the majority of the time when you are holding up mana, you do have something. And so it helps create a story around you that you can use to your advantage. Unfortunately, as humans, we like to find patterns in behavior, and a lot of the times things are largely random. Patterns don't really exist where we try to find them. But by creating a pattern of behavior where you maybe show a counter spell or play more interaction in situations where you don't have it, then you actually bluffing might make your opponents change the way they play one card before the other, play suboptimally and not go for it based on the situation that you have. So something like that, bluffing can be very important in the short term, but also create a narrative in the long term in a set play group that can help you. The next piece is that using the priority and its rule system is very important, because again, if the average Magic player is coming into the game through Commander and through a casual route, it's going to be very important to get a good grasp of the rules at hand to improve how you can take advantage of the game. So specifically, when it comes to the stack, it's understanding when you can take priority at what point, what priority even means, and what you need to do when it comes to active player versus non-active player. So for example, maybe it goes to your opponent's turn, they have a bunch of triggers that go off. As those triggers resolve, maybe, they draw a bunch of extra cards on their upkeep. But every time they draw a card, maybe you have an Orcish Bowmaster that triggers. And then when that Orcish Bowmaster triggers, something else triggers, or whatever it is. And then you order them based on active player, non-active player, but then they resolve in another way. So the active player puts their cards on the stack first, their triggers on the stack, then the non-active player puts it on top. So in that order, the non-active player actually resolves first. And so these are the type of things that you want to think about when you're close to maybe losing the game. You have 5 life, but you're trying to draw a lot of cards against an Orcish Bowmasters and stuff like that. So understanding the rules is a good reason to, work on your stack priority, but also it helps you take advantage of these games of higher level CDH bracket 4 type of games, where you can understand that when you go to cast a spell, you can then respond to that spell yourself and put more spells on the stack. So for example, if you're thinking of something like this is an example from an old Trinket made video actually. I think it was 2 years ago, or it might've been a year ago, but I always stuck with it as a good example. So when you resolve something like a Walking Ballista, a giant XX spell, when you put that spell onto the stack, let's say X is equal to, XX, you're having it come in as a 5/5, right? It's gonna have 5/1/1 counters onto it, and your opponent's at 4 life, right? What you can then do is say, okay, I'm going to put this onto your stack. Do you respond? Opponent says, no, I have no counterspell. That creature resolves. Great. So that spell then resolves. You get priority again. You have to do something for your opponent to then react to. But when you do something, you can then react again. Your opponent only gets to react once priority is passed, but that doesn't mean those things resolve. The key to this, though, is if your opponent has a removal spell for the Walking Ballista, then you can hold priority and then remove all counters from the Walking Ballista to then destroy your opponent through damage through life at that point. So you have 5 counters on your Walking Ballista, your opponent's at 4 life. You remove 4 counters by holding priority on the Walking Ballista and then, interact with your opponent. In this case, if your opponent maybe had a spell that was split second, there's that black and 1 split second spell that makes it so all creatures are like O2s until the end of turn. If you want to beat something like that, that's a card your opponent has, maybe through, deck knowledge or the situation at hand. You saw their hand from before, maybe prior politicking of what they have. You can then, again, understanding priority and how that works, going through turn order, you can then understand that, wait, I can actually remove all these counters before you do anything to my creature, before you even go to remove it. And now the damage is on the stack, and I don't care if you remove my Walking Ballista at this point. You have to now gain life to even stop this. And that's why all of that stuff is important. And you have to remember, on the reverse order, the other thing I will say before I get to my third point is that every time a spell resolves, you get to re-react. So let's say everyone puts a bunch of things on the stack, right? And let's say a bunch of draw triggers are going off. So every time someone casts a spell, a Rhystic Study trigger goes off. You have to remember that, the Rhystic Study trigger goes off, you draw a card, draw a card, draw a card. Okay, spell resolves, draw a card, second spell resolves, draw a card here. Then the third spell resolves, and then all of a sudden you can say, or the third spell goes to it, does it resolve? Well, you can then actually respond to it, because a bunch of players have resolved a bunch of spells and have drawn a bunch of cards. They have gained some level of advantage and resources, and they can then use those resources then to finally counter that spell. So you might have drawn into the Force of Will, the Flare of Denial, whatever it is, the free counter magic that no one is expecting because you're tapped out. And then you can finally interact with that last spell, making sure that the wind does not go off. And so that's how understanding the rules of the game are very important, and how paying attention to stuff like this is very key. Understanding the information that you give across is very important when it comes to politicking. And I think that's one of the first things a lot of players will know before they learn all the rules and how layers work. But when it comes to priority, it's really important in this situation highlighted to make sure that people who have interaction should go first. You shouldn't jump the gun. So if someone puts a win on the stack, you are third. The second person, let them go. Don't use your counterspell. Just wait. Don't let them get their value, because your resource is more valuable to you on your turn, even if maybe your resource is something like a mana drain and you want to get that off and you want to get the mana so you can cast something big on your turn. Let the opponent cast their counterspell, because even when they put the counterspell on the stack, they've used that resource. You don't need to let it resolve. You can still mana drain in response to that counterspell to steal that counterspell, get your mana. Their counterspell is still used in that case. So there's still ways for you to take advantage of things. The last thing I want to talk about when it comes to priority is going to be not letting yourself be surprised by maybe something like split second, and how we can, abuse split second in different ways. So Split Second is a keyword on many abilities that, more recently has become relevant when it comes to CDH discussions and Universe Beyond with Shadow the Hedgehog, making it so any spell you cast that used artifact mana to cast it and put it on the stack has Split Second on it. And so it's kind of coming about in the forefront again. One of the most broken mechanics ever in Magic's history. It makes it so you cannot cast spells or perform actions in general unless they're special actions in response to that spell now on the stack. Essentially a super mega uncounterable, everyone can't do anything type of card. Now, when it comes to Split Second, there are still ways to interact in this case, because you can still resolve triggers and you can still have abilities happen in response to triggers if those are triggered. All right, so think about two specific scenarios here. The first one that I want to bring up is in a skit. Both of these are skits that I've done in the past, but can be common interactions. The first one is in CDH with Hashaton. Hashaton says whenever you discard a card, if I believe it's a creature card, you may pay 3 mana, blue and 2, to create a 4/4 copy of that creature and have it enter the battlefield. So if you have something like a Split Second spell on the stack, you can protect a Hashaton win with something like a Lion's Eye Diamond. Now, this is pretty advanced magic here, pretty expensive magic, some that a lot of people aren't going to come across, but Lion's Eye Diamond is essentially a Black Lotus that makes you discard your hand, right? So just follow me here for all my audio listeners. 0 mana, have it activated, add 3 mana of 1 color, but you have to discard your hand. The key to this is now you have 3 mana on the stack to then discard your hand. The discard your hand then goes through, and then you have a bunch of triggers based on the creatures that you've discarded, Hashaton. So now all of this is still happening underneath the Split Second because the Lion's Eye Diamond is actually a mana ability, which is a special action. Mox Opal, the mana ability off of the Lion's Eye Diamond, as I mentioned. Even lands are all special actions. You can tap in response to that. So if someone was to put a land destruction spell with Split Second onto the stack, you can tap out your mana in response to that. So mana abilities do work. So you can activate the Lion's Eye Diamond. Then what happens is you discard maybe something like Thassa's Oracle. You can then activate the Hashaton trigger for 3 mana with the Lion's Eye Diamond that you used to then create a token copy of the Thassa's Oracle to then win the game if you have no cards in library. You can even continue that even further. Maybe you have something like a Leveler in your hand. You discard the Leveler with another 3 mana that you have somewhere. You then create a token copy of the Leveler, flip around your deck and everything, no cards in library. Then the trigger of the Thassa's Oracle or Hashaton trigger resolves. You create a 4/4 copy, Thassa's Oracle, you win the game. So these are all examples of triggers that are based off of special actions, that are based off of lands. So maybe there are triggers that happen when you gain a life, and a land you control gains a life when you tap it. And so there are situations like this that you can abuse the stack when someone else is trying to stop you from doing so. Another great place to abuse the stack is to protect a win by yourself. And this is, again, similar to how Hashaton works, but in a different sense, in a constructed 1v1 60 card format. Pauper, the Pauper Goblins combo actually has a quote unquote protected win, a protected infinite underneath Split Second. So you have something like Skirk Prospector, a 1 mana 1/1 goblin that says you can sacrifice another goblin and add 1 red mana to your mana pool. What you then do is you play 2 cards, Putrid Goblin, which has it's not Wither, it's the other one, but it says whenever it you sacrifice it or it dies, it hits the graveyard, you have it returned with the 1/1 counter on it. So it's a 2 mana 1/1. It then enters with a 1/1, it actually is Wither. It's a 2 mana 2/2. It enters with a -1/-1 counter, but then you play something like First Day of Class. First Day of Class is red sorcery that says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control this turn, it enters with a 1/1 counter on it. So you then remove the -1/-1 counter off of Wither, you add the +1/+1 counter, it's now a 2/2 again. So you can do the Skirk Prospector loop over and over again. The reason you can activate the Skirk Prospector loop is because it is a mana ability. It creates mana. It is not just a generic activated ability that taps something down or does something else. You can activate this underneath Split Second because it is a mana ability. Traditionally, the Goblins deck is actually very weak to removal. Honestly, very bad in Pauper right now with Jund Wildfires at the top of the metagame. But when it comes to something like a Split Second win condition, so you might play Siege Smash, red and 1, that says target creature gets +3/+2, or destroy target artifact. You can target your Skirk Prospector. You don't even need an artifact to target. You target the Skirk Prospector, spell on the stack, the card has Split Second. Then you go off with your loop, assuming you've cast the Putrid Goblin already and you have to cast those cards first, by the way. So your opponent might be waiting to, use their priority to their advantage and react at the last possible moment, in which case they are now going to get punished for it through the siege match. So you're able to protect your win, you're able to generate an infinite amount of mana. And once you have an infinite amount of mana with some amount of cards, Goblin Matron, all that stuff, you should be able to figure out a win at that point from there. So these are examples of how you can make sure that the split second interactions are not going to be something surprising for you. A lot of people have mentioned Morph as well. Morph is a special action, so you can bring Morph cards back, flip up to counter certain abilities and destroy certain things. So there are situations where stuff like that can work as well. But also understanding rules and understanding what you have access to and how you can actually take advantage of them, again, with the Walking Ballista example, is also an important edge that you can have in your game of Commander. But also, even without the rules, the information that you give across to your opponents is also very important. Remembering the context of it, again, are you revealing this information with one card in hand? Are you revealing this information with multiple cards in your hand? How are you bluffing? How are you creating a story around yourself throughout multiple games in a play group? All of this comes into mind. Now, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. This was a quick yap about, kind of priority and how that all comes together in a multiplayer game of Commander, a little bit of priority building. I wanted to add a little bit of discussion to it, maybe add some combos in there. Maybe this qualifies as slop content, but I hope my knowledge can at least imbue something in all of y'all with using some of the skits I made before. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Let me know what was your favorite moment of maybe using priority to your advantage in your games. I myself have had plenty of examples when it comes to 1v1 modern or whatever it is. Obviously there's a ton when it comes to Commander, but I think my more memorable ones are when it comes to Constructed. Let's swap some stories and talk a little bit about priority.